What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. Before I hopped on here, I was on the phone with one of my homies, and he only watches the Jacksonville Jaguars. When the Jaguars aren't playing, he's not watching football at all. And I don't know if I'm the only person who feels this way, but when I'm talking to somebody that doesn't watch football that much or at all, it kind of feels like you're talking to a foreigner, because it's kind of like, you don't watch football? What do you mean you don't watch football? So if you don't watch football, what else are you doing on your Sundays? Or you're playing 2K? Okay. You're missing out on some very fun entertainment, though, because, I mean, the NFL, not only is it fun to watch on Sundays, but even when there is no football on to watch, there's always storylines that keep you tapped in with the league, such as Rashee Rice, the Chiefs' number one wide receiver, having to do a 30-day bid in jail for violating the terms of his probation. We'll dive into how Rashee Rice's recent probation violation impacts the Kansas City Chiefs and how it's going to impact his future with the team. The New England Patriots, how good are they going to be coming off their Super Bowl loss to the Seattle Seahawks, having one of the easiest routes to get there? Now this season, they have one of the toughest schedules in the NFL. Will that make them regress, or will they still be a playoff contender? Joe Burrow made some very bold statements about his thoughts on the Bengals' offseason moves. He said that this team has everything they need to go the distance. Is that true, or is this just offseason optimism? Aaron Rodgers has officially announced that this is going to be his final season in the league. This is his last ride, and the Steelers went all in to make sure that he has a good ending to his career. We'll talk about how far Aaron Rodgers can take the black and gold this upcoming season. I got thoughts on the war that has ensued among Falcons fans over who should be their starting quarterback. And then I'm going to reveal to you guys 10 breakout players that the NFL doesn't see coming for this season. If you live, eat, breathe, sleep, and die football, hey, congratulations, you have arrived at the right place. We're talking all things football, NFL, college football, 24/7, 365 days throughout the year. If you're a diehard football fan, you can't go a day without getting your football fix in. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon so you do not miss when we drop new content. Remember, we are not just a YouTube channel. We are a podcast. You can find this episode and all of our previous ones in audio format wherever you get your podcast from. Give us a 5-star review if you enjoy the content. You want to support the grind. We are trying to crack the top 100 of the Apple football podcast charts. We can't do that without you. So go ahead, give us a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. The JT Sports Podcast is available. And let's dive into it. Rashee Rice having to do a 30-day bid in jail for violating the terms of his probation is super wild. And before we even get to the football aspect of this is just crazy to me that Patrick Mahomes' best receiver is literally going to jail during the offseason. He's going to miss OTAs, mandatory minicamp, and then possibly maybe a few weeks of the start of the season, since he recently had surgery to clean up a knee procedure that he had done. So that's going to make him miss a significant amount of time after he gets done doing his 30-day bid in jail. And at some point, you have to start wondering how long Kansas City is going to continue to put up with the off-the-field shenanigans of Rashee Rice. Now, I'm not one of those morality guys. I'm not one of those guys that thinks that if you get arrested one time, you make one mistake off the field, that should be the end of your career. I'm one of those people that has the mindset, hey, as long as you're able to be available for me on Sundays, I don't care what you do off the field, as long as you're not beating on people or murdering anybody like Aaron Hernandez. Eventually, when you have a guy like Rashee Rice that just continues to find trouble in the offseason, you start having to ask, is the liability justified for the talent that we have. And I don't think that's the case with Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice is a good receiver, but he's not good enough to keep justifying putting up with all these off-the-field incidents that he continues to be involved in, because now he starts becoming more of a liability. And with the Chiefs already kind of being thin at receiver as what it is, losing Rashee Rice possibly for a few weeks into the season with what happened with his knee cleanup, it's just not worth it anymore. The Chiefs can't trust Rashee Rice. And when you can't trust somebody, they're not worth keeping them on the team. And this is just more than him doing 30 days in jail. It's more so the bigger point of this, because the reason why he even got on probation to begin with was due to the car accident that he caused a few years ago back in 2024, which he should have gotten significant jail time for that. But with him being an athlete, having that celebrity money, affording a good lawyer, he was able to get off with a slap on the wrist. But you can't even do probation without smoking weed. And trust me, I love to smoke me some weed. I've come on here plenty of times, high as a kite. But it's just too many things that Rashee Rice has going on off the field to keep putting up with the problems that he keeps putting himself in. Once you get to the offseason, it becomes more of a maturity thing. And Rashee Rice still hasn't matured since his last off the field debacle. Kansas City now, I think you have to start entertaining, possibly trading for A.J. Brown. You don't really know how reliable Rashee Rice is. You don't know how good he's going to be coming off a significant injury that he's going to have to get some surgery done to, or he just had surgery done on. So at this point, Kansas City, if you are still trying to be a Super Bowl contender for this season, you got to get some upgrades at receiver. Now, Jalen Royals is a guy that I could see coming in, replace Rashee Rice if he misses some significant time throughout the season. I expect him to be a huge breakout candidate for this offense along with Josh Simmons. But outside of Jalen Royals, even if he does break out, who else do you have at receiver? You got Xavier Worthy, but at this point, you're more so looking at Xavier Worthy from a glass half full, glass half empty perspective than you are being optimistic that, yeah, I'm fully confident Xavier Worthy is going to be a guy that can be a reliable contributor for us, because he's been more of just a big play guy and hasn't been able to stay healthy. And when he's been on the field, he hasn't really done that much. Now, maybe with Kansas City bringing back Eric Bieniemy, that can be what Xavier Worthy needs to get his career trending in the right direction. But Kansas City just doesn't have a lot of firepower on offense. So you don't want to have one of your most important pieces on offense constantly being involved in these off-the-field incidents. One or two off-the-field incidents in the offseason is okay. But to just have these repeated offenses that you're getting from Rashee Rice, eventually Kansas City has to start saying, you know what, you're a good player, but you're not good enough to justify the liability that you are. And look, this is a prove-it year for Rashee Rice. I don't think they should cut him right now because he still is productive. But if he keeps getting in any more off-the-field incidents, you got to start saying, eventually you're just too much of a head case. You're just always into something. You can never stay out of trouble. You're not mature. We need to move on to go in a different direction. And Kansas City at this point, this brother's doing a 30-day bid in jail, can't participate in minicamp, can't participate in any more OTAs. I think that you might need to start shopping around and finding Rashee Rice replacement. And I think you can start with A.J. Brown. All the Eagles wants a first-round pick and some change for him. I think A.J. Brown makes a lot of sense for Kansas City. Is he a little bit of a diva? Sure, but everybody's a diva when they have a quarterback that can't get them the football. Kansas City has a better culture than what the Philadelphia Eagles has. I don't think that A.J. Brown's going to be raging on the sidelines because Patrick Mahomes misses him when he's wide open or overthrows him when he's wide open 20 yards downfield, like how he's had to do with Jalen Hurts, since Patrick Mahomes is a much better quarterback than what Jalen Hurts is. So I don't think that you would get the same amount of drama out of A.J. Brown if you trade for him being Kansas City than what he's given the Philadelphia Eagles these last couple of years. But this Rashee Rice incident, to me, I think it's one of the final straws that if you're Kansas City, this dude has no more strikes. Another strike, and he has to be out of there. A lot has been made about how much more difficult the Patriots schedule is going to be this year. Last year, they made it to the Super Bowl with one of the easiest paths you'll ever see a team have to the Super Bowl. Their regular season schedule wasn't that tough. Their playoff schedule wasn't really that tough either. You had to play Justin Herbert in the first round. Your defense shut him down. In the second round, let's just be honest, C.J. Stroud gifted you that game. And then in the AFC Championship, you beat Jarrett Stidham in a blizzard. So when you played the Seattle Seahawks and you got annihilated the way that you did, it wasn't really that surprising, but it still doesn't diminish how successful that season was and how good the Patriots should be going into this season. This idea that just because a team benefited from an easy schedule the previous season, it's going to be why they regressed the following season, I can't really 100% get behind. Sure, the Patriots schedule has increased in difficulty, but this isn't the same Patriots team that we saw last year make it to the Super Bowl. They are much better on the offensive line. They possibly could have A.J. Brown, which is what they're going to need if they hope to make it back to the Super Bowl for a second straight season under Mike Vrabel. I still think for New England, with the consistency that they have out of Drake Maye, who I feel is an elite quarterback, Mike Vrabel, despite the cheating scandal that he's had to deal with this offseason, that's not going to impact his ability to coach this team. Defensively, there's still a lot of talent there, even though with the loss of Caleb Von Chasen, you wonder who's going to be that next man up that steps up and be a productive pass rusher for them. But the team is still good enough to be a lock for the playoffs. I think that the floor for the Patriots this year, at worst, this is a 10-win team. At best, I think if you have A.J. Brown, you could be competing for the 1 seed in the AFC. If you don't have A.J. Brown, then you could be one of the last teams that gets into the playoffs as a 7th or 6th seed. You see, with the schedule that the Patriots have this year, you're going to need to be more talented of a team than what you were last season. This season, you're going up against 13 teams that are good enough to make it to the playoffs. So out of the 17 games that you're playing, 13 of those games are going to be up against playoff caliber opponents. So therefore, to maintain consistency, you need to have high-level players on this squad, and having A.J. Brown would be a part of that. If you don't have A.J. Brown, it becomes much more difficult to sustain consistency when you have this much of a gauntlet that you have as a schedule. When you have 17 games and 13 of those games are going up against teams that possibly could not just be playoff teams, but maybe borderline Super Bowl contenders, yeah, you need to have more high-end talent. And the Patriots don't really have that right now. If they don't get A.J. Brown, your receiving core is probably going to be one of the least talented in the NFL. Now, last year, even if you take out Stephon Diggs, your receiving core still wasn't that bad because you had a lot of guys that were really good rotational pieces. It's not like you were completely not talented at that spot, but it more so was you had guys that were able to step up when their names were called. There wasn't really a guy that you knew for certain was going to be that number 2. It just was every other game. Maybe Mac Hollins has a big game. Maybe Kayshon Boutte has a big game. You know, it just was every other game. There just was another guy stepping up at receiver for New England behind Stephon Diggs. This year, though, with the schedule being so difficult, it's going to be more peaks and valleys that the Patriots are going to have to deal with this season. Last year, they didn't really have too many highs and lows. It mostly was just a lot of highs, not really a lot of lows. This year, you're going to have some highs when maybe you start the season out hot and maybe you're 4-0, 3-0. And then eventually you get to October, November, the injuries start to set in, attrition starts to play a factor, and then you end up going on a 4-game losing streak. That's how difficult this schedule is, and that's how this schedule can affect the Patriots' performance this season. You don't see the same consistency from week to week this year as to what you saw last year with this team. Now, if you get A.J. Brown, without a doubt, you're a playoff team, and you probably could be right back in the mix to make it to the AFC Championship game. But if you don't have A.J. Brown, you don't have that high-end talent that you need to survive a schedule this rigorous. And that's why with New England, I'm not completely writing them off as being a Super Bowl contender necessarily, but they're not one of those teams that I circle that I am as high on as what I am when it comes to the Ravens, the Bills, the Texans. They're not a Super Bowl contender. They more so are the perfect definition of what a dark horse Super Bowl contender would be. If they get A.J. Brown and they have a few things go their way throughout the course of this season, because you're going to have more losses than what you had last year. That's without a doubt. Since with how difficult this schedule is, you'll probably at best be a 12-win team. Now, if you hit your ceiling truly, and you are just as good as what you were last year and even better on the offensive line, and you're able to find another guy to replace Caleb Vaughn Chasen on the pass rush side of things, then sure, you could be right back in the AFC Championship, possibly back in the Super Bowl again. But I just think that there are too many teams this year that the Patriots could run into in the postseason that just have so much more firepower than what they have, that it's going to be very tough sledding for them to repeat the success that they had last season. Still doesn't take away from how great of a job Mike Vrabel did, but this season, it's going to be incredibly tough sledding for New England. You got 13 potential playoff teams that you're going to be going up against. And your first 4 games to start this season, brutal. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in, wherever you're watching, whether that be live right now on YouTube or you're listening to the replay after on podcasting platforms. Make sure that you share this episode with your friends, family members, acquaintances. They always say that sharing is caring. So why not share the early gift of JT Sports with a person that you know lives, eats, breathes, sleeps, and dies football. Also, if you're tuned in live right now, do your brother a favor, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell icon if you're new so you don't miss when we drop new content. Follow us at JT Sports _ on Instagram, X, TikTok. We post bonus content on there. We answer questions from you guys in the DM. So go ahead, give us a follow at JT Sports _ on Instagram, TikTok, and especially Twitter, because sometimes it feels like I'm just talking to myself on Twitter. So I would love to get a little bit more engagement from you guys. So go ahead, follow your boy at JT Sports _ where you can find us on all social media platforms. Let's keep this thing rolling, man. Joe Burrow gave his thoughts on the Bengals offseason moves, and he sounds very excited about what the Cincinnati Bengals can accomplish this season coming up. He called this the most talented roster he's been a part of since he first got to Cincinnati. And with the moves they've made on defense, he believes the Bengals have everything they need. Now, he didn't necessarily come out and say, yeah, we're going to go back to the Super Bowl, but his comments kind of give off those vibes. He said this was the most talented roster that he's ever been a part of since he first got to Cincinnati. And the Bengals went to the Super Bowl in 2021, Joe Burrow's second season. That roster was pretty good. If this year's team is better than that 2021 Bengals squad, this team, you mean to tell me they can't beat the Ravens, the Bills, the Texans for the AFC Championship and get back to the Super Bowl? People forget that the Bengals are the only team outside of Tom Brady's Patriots that have beaten the Kansas City Chiefs in the postseason. We also seem to forget that Joe Burrow outplayed Josh Allen the last time he saw him in the playoffs as well. A lot of folks seem to forget about that. You ever saw the Men in Black, how they have the little flash thing? They hit the little button that makes you forget everything. I think the national media did that after Josh Allen lost to Joe Burrow in that blizzard, because nobody ever talks about how Joe Burrow just completely outplayed and outclassed Josh Allen in that playoff game. Joe Burrow, essentially with these comments, how I interpret them is he's saying that, listen, as long as I'm able to stay healthy, the Bengals are as good as anybody when it comes to being able to win it all this year. The Bengals, sure, you have some question marks about just how improved is that defense. And I'm not going to act like I'm the biggest fan of every move that the Bengals made on that side of the football, but you can't deny that the defense is better than what it was last year. Going into this same time last offseason, I was telling you guys that the Bengals had the worst defense in the league. They had a Dollar Tree defense, and they thought that replacing Lou Anarumo without Golden was just going to be the simple fix for it. No, it doesn't matter how good of a coach you are if the talent isn't there. So this offseason, you add a Jonathan Allen, you get Boye Mafe, you trade the 10th overall pick for Dexter Lawrence. Sure, some of those moves were high risk, like giving up the 10th selection for Dexter Lawrence, but the reward is really high. Dexter Lawrence, if he reverts back to the player that he was prior to last season, you're looking at not just one of the best players at his position, but one of the best defensive players in the entirety of the league. When you have a defensive tackle as good as Dexter Lawrence that is not just formidable at stopping the run, but it's elite at getting after the quarterback, he's going to have a bigger impact on the Bengals defense than what Trey Hendrickson was. Because when you have a dominant specimen in the middle of that defensive line, there's only so many ways the offense can game plan to stop them. And it also creates more opportunities for guys like Jonathan Allen, Boye Mafe, Cassius Howell, who was a very huge steal that the Bengals walked away with after the second round of this past year's draft. They got a very good secondary. Their corners are a lot better than what you may think. So the Bengals defensively, the talent is there for this defense to be good enough. And that's all the Bengals need. They just need their defense to be good enough. They don't need the 85 Bears defense or the 2000 Ravens defense to win it all this year, since they have an offense that can score 30, 40 points every game in their sleep. So as long as the defense can give up no more than 23, 24 points, the Bengals to me look like a lock for the playoffs. And they have one of the more easier schedules in the NFL, not including the teams they're going up against in their division. We know that they more than likely sweep the Browns. Maybe they sweep either the Steelers or the Ravens. I think they sweep at least one of those teams, and they probably split with the one that they don't sweep. With how light this schedule looks, the ceiling for the Bengals is you could be good enough to have a first-round bye come playoff time. You could clinch the number one seed since you could have the best record. Your schedule is that easy. I think the floor for the Bengals, the worst-case scenario for the Bengals this year, if shit hits the fan, you should at least be a 10-win team. Now, does that guarantee you a playoff spot? I don't know, because the AFC is wide open this year. That's why I'm saying the Bengals have just as good as a chance as anybody to win the AFC. The Bills and the Ravens are the favorites to win this conference, but it's wide open. The Texans, the Jaguars, anybody could win the Super Bowl this year, at least win the AFC this year. So why not the Bengals? I just think for the Bengals, if things don't go right for you, though, you're still a 10-win team. It's just you could be a 10-win team and still miss the playoffs this year. That's how crowded the AFC is this year. But I think that the Bengals have just as high as the floor as any other team in the league, and their ceiling is just as high as anybody else because you have arguably the best offense in the league. The offensive line is good. We know how great the receivers are. And I think that Chase Brown is a very underrated running back. He won a few games for me in my fantasy leagues last year. So Joe Burrow, I don't think this is just your typical off-season talk. Oh, of course, everybody thinks their team is good enough to compete for a Super Bowl. Of course, but Joe Burrow is one of those players that he's very honest. He doesn't say anything that he doesn't truly feel. And Joe Burrow is the main reason why the Bengals had the great offseason that they've had. Joe Burrow, unlike Carson Palmer in the past, he hasn't gone about voicing his displeasures, kind of passive-aggressively. Joe Burrow, when he has something that he wants, he has no problem coming out and saying it publicly. When he has something that he isn't rocking with, he has no problem coming out and saying it. And at the end of last season, he said that, the team needs to do more. And what did the Bengals front office do? They listened to Joe Burrow, and they did more. They improved the defense. They got Jonathan Allen. They got a very good safety from the Chiefs. I mean, this defense, even if you don't like all of the moves that the Bengals have made necessarily, you can't deny that they're much more improved on this side of the ball than what the hell they were last year. And I think that Joe Burrow could also win MVP this season possibly. Every season when Joe Burrow has been healthy, he's at least thrown for 35, 40 touchdowns. And the last time he played a full regular season, he should have won MVP. It's just that the Bengals missed out on the playoffs because the defense let him down. Joe Burrow is 47 touchdowns away from breaking the Cincinnati Bengals franchise passing touchdown record. And he would love to do it. When somebody asked him about it, he said that it's doable. And with Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Chase Brown, and everything else that they have in that offense, I don't see why Joe Burrow can't break it and why he also can't win NFL MVP this year. I mean, the AFC has never been as wide open as what it is right now. There's a cluster of teams that could win the AFC this year. The Broncos, the Chargers, the Chiefs. Then you got the Bills, the Ravens. The Bengals are in the mix. Hell, I think even the Steelers possibly could win the AFC this year, best case scenario. That's being overly optimistic as a Steelers fan, but the AFC is wide open. If the Bills and the Ravens can still win it all despite having new head coaches, why can't the Bengals? They are the only team in the AFC outside of the Patriots that has taken down Patrick Mahomes and the evil dynasty in the postseason. And they almost did it twice, back to back. So if there's anybody that I have confidence in, that I believe when he says that this team has everything they need to go on another Super Bowl run, it is Joe Burrow. Because you know what they call Arrowhead, right? They call that thing Burrowhead. Joe Burrow is the Patrick Mahomes stopper. So, hey, I'm not finna bet against and sleep on the Patrick Mahomes stopper. We got a lot of people tapped in. We got people going crazy in the chat right now. Shout out to my guy, M. Sparks. He says, what's good, JT? Pittsburgh Steelers for life. My guy, Archangel 80 says they not sweeping the Ravens, probably Browns and Steelers. My guy says, got my Bengals tickets early. Shout out to everybody that's tuned in, man. Hey, do your brother a favor. I don't see any likes right now, man. We got all these people tapped in, man. Smash that like button. Help us rank higher in that YouTube algorithm, man. That YouTube algorithm really been tweaking lately. And some of you guys have messaged me and said that, you know, you don't get notified every time I upload a new video. So you need to make sure that you're subscribed and that you hit that bell icon so you never miss when we drop new content. And also join the Discord. We're talking football 24/7, any time of the day, whether you're up 6 o'clock in the morning or you're up at 3 o'clock at night. Join the JT Sports Discord. We're trying to get that thing more active. I'm not really responding to comments like that anymore since I just think it's kind of counterproductive to be responding to comments, since most of the times when I go back and forth with you guys, it never ends. Nobody's ever going to admit that they're wrong. I'm not going to admit that you're right, and you're not going to admit that I'm right. So it's not really a lot of purpose in me continuing to go back and forth with some of you guys. But if you join the Discord, though, we can go back and forth all day long. So go ahead, join the JT Sports Discord. The link is down in the description below. Shout out to Irish Whisker. He says, what's up, JT? Love your content, especially the college football content. Hey, man, I appreciate you, man, and I appreciate all the support. Today is a very sad day for my childhood. Aaron Rodgers has officially announced that this will be his last season in the NFL. This is the last ride for Aaron Rodgers. And it just hurts to hear him say that, since when I first became a fan of the NFL, it was the early 2010s. This is when Aaron Rodgers didn't become a household name like what he is now. He was still establishing himself, trying to cement himself as one of the best up-and-coming quarterbacks in the league. And when you first start watching football, you kind of gravitate towards the guys that, you know, aren't really household names, that are trying to become one of the all-time greats. And when they actually do it, you know, you end up having a strong emotional attachment to them, to where when they exit the league, you kind of feel like it's not the same. And this is coming from somebody that watched the prime years of Drew Brees, Big Ben, Phillip Rivers, Eli Manning, and a host of other good quarterbacks. And it also makes me feel a lot older than what I actually am. I'm like 23, 24 years old, but Aaron Rodgers announcing his decision to say this is going to be his last ride, it makes me feel like I'm 40. It makes me feel like I've gone through a whole millennium. I watched the beginning of Aaron Rodgers' career, from winning his first MVP, winning his first ever Super Bowl, to, you know, the debacle that happened with the Jets, to now, you know, leading the Steelers to the playoffs last year and running it back with the Steelers one last time. I've seen every phase, every twist and turn of Aaron Rodgers' career. It kind of feels like I've grown up with Aaron Rodgers, even though I don't really know him. And the thing that makes this season so special for not just Aaron Rodgers and the Steelers in general is that I don't think Aaron Rodgers is the only Steeler that is playing his last season. I think that we possibly could see Cam Hayward hang it up after this year. Maybe Jalen Ramsey hangs it up after this season. Who knows? Maybe TJ Watt shocks us and he prematurely retires. But that's what's so special about the Steelers. The Steelers didn't make it to the playoffs last season because they were the most talented team in the AFC North. They made it to the playoffs because they were the team that played the most team-oriented football. The Ravens more so were a two-man team. It was Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. And when Derrick Henry got put in the doghouse by John Harbaugh and Lamar Jackson got injured, the Ravens completely fell apart. The Steelers were able to come together just because of the veteran leadership that they had in that locker room. You had guys like Jalen Ramsey, Cam Hayward with a lot of pride. When the season felt like it was slipping away from the Steelers, those guys were able to rally the troops, get everybody back on the same page. And that's why winning the AFC North, even though the Steelers got bounced in the first round of playoffs like they have done for over the last decade, it still felt special. It still was a special moment because the team, the way that they were able to bond and just the camaraderie that they had, that's what made the season last year so special for Pittsburgh. And I expect for the team to rally even more, considering that this is the last year that Aaron Rodgers is going to be playing quarterback in the NFL again. And when you have somebody that has the admiration, the respect that Aaron Rodgers has from not just his teammates, but from coaches, not just on the Steelers, but the rest of the coaches in the league, the rest of the players in the league, you know, the Steelers have done everything they can to make sure that Aaron Rodgers has the best last ride possible. And I don't think that Aaron Rodgers' career is going to end on the low note, at least what some would consider to be a low note. I don't think the Steelers are going to miss the playoffs, go 9-8 in Aaron Rodgers' final season. This is a much better team than what he had to work with last year. If Aaron Rodgers wasn't quarterback for the Steelers last year, this wouldn't have been a playoff team. They had the worst receiving core in the league. They were 26 in rushing yards per game. The offensive line was beat up and couldn't stay healthy. And you had Arthur Smith, the worst offensive coordinator that God ever put on this earth, calling the plays. This year, though, you reunite Aaron Rodgers with the same guy he came into the league with, Mike McCarthy. Isn't that ironic? You upgrade receiver. You bring in Michael Pittman. You draft Jeremy Bernard in the second round of this draft, who is a great backup option for Mekhi Lemon, who they were unable to get. Jeremy Bernard, I expect him to be one of the most productive rookies in the NFL this year. Aaron Rodgers is really going to love Jeremy Bernard. He has great hands, doesn't have a lot of drop issues, and he's phenomenal after the catch. I don't think the Steelers have had a wide receiver this good after the catch since the early years of Juju Smith-Schuster. So everything that the Steelers have this year should set Aaron Rodgers up for this being a great last ride. Now, is he going to ride off to the sunset? Is he going to ride off hoisting that Lombardi trophy for one last time? I don't think so, but I at least believe the Steelers win a playoff game this year. What has held the Steelers back in the postseason hasn't just been the lack of having a high-end young quarterback. It's also been Mike Tomlin being held back, handicapping the Steelers with a very bad coaching staff. Mike Tomlin was basically the Pittsburgh Steelers. He didn't really have any support other than, you know, having some good players. To go far in the playoffs, even if you have some talented teams, you still need to have a very good coaching staff. And Mike Tomlin didn't surround himself with a good coaching staff. He had some of the worst coordinators you possibly could hire. It's kind of like Mike Tomlin was doing the coaching themselves in a sense. Now with Mike McCarthy having a legitimate staff, you have Patrick Graham as your defensive coordinator. He's a solid DC. He's not a great DC, but he's solid. With the personnel that Steelers have on this side of the ball, plus them bringing in Jaquan Brisker, bringing back Asante Samuel, this is a pretty solid defense. This at least should be a top 12 or better defense. At least it'll look like one of the highest paid defenses, unlike how it has in the last few years under Terrell Austin. And with Mike McCarthy calling the plays, the Steelers' offense should look a lot better. We shouldn't see the Steelers trying to throw on Denzel Ward to win the game with Marquez Valdez-Scantling. You feel me? So even though I don't believe Aaron Rodgers is going to ride off into the sunset with a Super Bowl, I do feel like Aaron Rodgers is going to get a better ending to his career than what his career would have ended on if he never came back and his career just ended with the loss of the Houston Texans in the wild card round. I think that this has the ability to be a very special team for Pittsburgh, not because they're super talented, but just because of the togetherness that they're going to have with this possibly being not just Aaron Rodgers last season, but Cam Hayward, Jalen Ramsey's last season. There's a lot of older vets on this team with a lot of younger guys, and that's what is going to make watching the Steelers this year feel so exciting than years past, because this feels like a complete team. May not be a team that has a lot of stars, but there aren't too many holes or glaring weaknesses that the Steelers have coming into this season that is going to hinder Aaron Rodgers like how it did last year. There's a war that has erupted on X between Atlanta Falcons fans over who should be the starting quarterback this year, Tua Tagovailoa or Michael Penix. And honestly, what's so funny about Falcons fans going at it over who they believe should be QB1 is that both Michael Penix and Tua are cut from the same cloth. They both are left-handed. They both don't really have that much mobility. And then they also are heavily injury prone. So you're pretty much picking the worst of the bunch, right? And this kind of reminds me of that Spider-Man meme when you have the two Spider-Man pointing at each other and they're saying, you. That's how Michael Penix and Tua Tagovailoa are looking at each other in the quarterback room right now. I think when you are looking at the benefits of what you would get starting both of these guys, for Tua, you get a guy that you already know what you're going to get out of him. We're at a point in Tua's career that I think you've already seen Tua at his best. I don't think this is one of those Tua just needed a change of scenery kind of things to get his career going right back in the right direction. Since you got to remember, when Tua signed that contract extension a few off seasons ago, that's when he started to regress. He had the concussion scare again, and then he had a few other injuries that added on top of that. And Tua has already had his fair share amount of injuries prior to that concussion scare that he had a while ago. But I think with all the injuries that Tua has sustained up to this point in his career, his ability to play at the level that he did when he first came into the league is no longer there. I don't think that he's the same player that he once was when he looked like one of the better up-and-coming quarterbacks in the league, and it looked justified for the Dolphins to make him one of the highest-paid QBs. But now you're kind of looking at Tua Tagovailoa as just, a bridge, stopgap quarterback to get you by for a year until you can find out who your long-term solution at quarterback is going to be. And for all the Falcons fans that keep saying that Tua still has some juice left in the tank, you got to remember, the Miami Dolphins were willing to take a $99 million cap hit, which completely is going to devastate them for the next 2 to 3 years. That tells you everything you need to know about how they view Tua. If the Dolphins were willing to take this devastating of a cap hit to get rid of Tua, it means that he's not good. There's never been a team that has taken this large of a dead cap hit to get rid of a quarterback, and that quarterback has gone on to be successful after. Look at what happened with Russell Wilson when he got cut by the Broncos. He wasn't that good in Pittsburgh. He didn't last that long as a starter for the Giants. Look what happened when the Atlanta Falcons cut Matt Ryan. Remember, they did the same thing that the Dolphins did with Tua. They took a massive cap hit to get rid of Matt Ryan, and he wasn't good after that. So normally, when a team takes a huge cap hit like what the Dolphins did to get rid of Tua, the guy doesn't end up being good anymore. Now, with Michael Penix, sure, you don't know how good Michael Penix is. Is Michael Penix a better quarterback right now than what Tua is? I think he is, but that's not a definitive. You feel me? That's just an assumption. Based off the small sample size that we've seen from Michael Penix, the jury is still out on him. And that's why it makes sense to start Michael Penix over Tua. Both of these quarterbacks are pretty much cut from the same cloth. They pretty much have the same playing style. They have the same limitations. They aren't that mobile. But Michael Penix is younger, has a stronger arm, and you still don't know what you have in Michael Penix, which is why it makes sense to start him. You still need to see if it was justified taking Michael Penix in the top 10. We know what Tua is at this point in his career. He's not going to turn into the savior for the Atlanta Falcons. He's just going to be good enough to get you by for this year until you find a better option at quarterback. We don't know what Tua, we know what Tua is. We don't know what Michael Penix is. We still got to evaluate Michael Penix, and we have not seen enough out of Michael Penix to completely write him off and say, yeah, this is Tua's job. And it's a lot easier to start Michael Penix, and if he struggles, transition to Tua, than it is you start Tua right out the gate, and then you bench Tua for Michael Penix. That's kind of backwards. You don't start a veteran over a younger player, and then when a veteran struggles, you go to the younger player. Michael Penix isn't a rookie anymore. This is his third season in the league. Now, if he was a rookie, that's a different story. He's not a rookie anymore. So if you're starting Tua over Michael Penix going into week 1, you essentially are saying that we wasted a top 10 pick on Michael Penix. People make it seem as if the Falcons are starting Tua, it's because they're allowing Michael Penix to develop. Michael Penix was one of the oldest quarterback prospects coming out of the draft a few years ago. You don't draft one of the oldest quarterbacks and then make him sit in his third season to learn. You feel me? That kind of defeated the purpose of drafting him. When you draft an older quarterback that has multiple years of starting experience coming out of college, you make him sit for a year, and then eventually he starts. You don't make him sit for the majority of his rookie year, then start him, then eventually make him ride the bench again to a guy like Tua, which we already know Tua's ceiling. The good thing for Atlanta is, regardless of who your quarterback is this year, whether that be Tua or Michael Penix, Kevin Stefanski's system isn't dependent on great quarterback play. It's dependent upon being able to run the football successfully and the quarterback taking good care of the football. Tua was a turnover machine last year. There's a reason why they call him Tua turn the ball over. Even though Michael Penix isn't that great, he did a better job taking care of the football than what Tua did. And if Tua is the starter with Michael Penix, you can't tolerate the amount of turnovers that Tua had, with this guy having more years under his belt, being a starting quarterback, than what Penix has. You can tolerate turnovers from Penix because he's a younger player who's still developing. You can't tolerate the amount of turnovers that Tua had with the Dolphins when you're a seasoned veteran. And once again, if Tua still had any juice left in the tank, the Miami Dolphins wouldn't have destroyed their franchise for the next 2-3 years to take a huge cap hit to get rid of this guy. With Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, there's enough there for the Atlanta Falcons to possibly win this division with Michael Penix at quarterback. It's not like the Atlanta Falcons are the only team in the NFC South with quarterback questions. The only team in this division that doesn't have a quarterback question are the Buccaneers. I don't know if Tyler Shuck is legit. I don't know if Bryce Young is going to be consistent this year. Sure, he improved, but his issue was inconsistency. Are you telling me that Bryce Young is going to be more consistent than what he was last year, with the Panthers having a much more difficult schedule? So I don't think that the quarterback position is what entirely makes or breaks the Atlanta Falcons this year. Their defense is the best in this division. And this defense should be one of the best in the NFL with everything that they have in the secondary, what they've added from a depth standpoint on the defensive line. So there's a recipe for the Falcons to have a successful season in spite of the quarterback situation being less than ideal. But I think if you're the Atlanta Falcons, you got to start Michael Penix week 1. We know what Tua is at this point. He's just a bridge stopgap quarterback. He is not the same quarterback that he was a few years ago due to the amount of injuries that he has gone through. Because if he was, he would still be on the Dolphins. The Dolphins wouldn't have taken such a devastating dead cap hit to get rid of him. We don't know what the Falcons have in Michael Penix right now. He only has such a small sample size. This is the year that tells us if the Falcons actually have a franchise quarterback in Michael Penix, or if they need to hit the drawing boards and draft another quarterback in a way deeper quarterback class next offseason. But if I was Kevin Stefanski, Michael Penix would be my QB1 over Tua. I want to talk about 10 breakout players that the NFL doesn't see coming going into this season. Starting off with second-year defensive tackle Walter Nolen. He was drafted in the first round by the Cardinals in last year's draft. And despite only playing in a handful of games, the few games that he appeared in, you could tell that Walter Nolen was legit. Normally, when you see a defensive tackle drafted in the first round, it's because they're not just good against the run, but they're also very good against the pass. And Walter Nolen, not only was he good against the run, but he was very impressive getting after the quarterback. Sure, the sack numbers aren't that impressive, but you got to also take into account that he only played like a fraction of the season. So for him to have the kind of numbers and production that he had in such a very small sample size, imagine if Walter Nolen would have played the entirety of last season. He probably would have been not just one of the best rookies in the NFL on the offensive side of the ball, but he would have been one of the best interior defensive linemen in the league. So if Walter Nolen can stay healthy this year, I think he's good enough to be a second-team All-Pro. That's how good he was and the limited amount of action that he played in for Arizona last year. Now, next up, I have Xavier Watts, who was second in the NFL in interceptions last year as a rookie. I was a huge fan of his when he was coming out of Notre Dame. This dude is just a ball hawk. He just has a good knack for making plays, and it's no wonder you pair him up with Jessie Bates, who has a similar playing style to Xavier Watts. The Atlanta Falcons are entering this year with one of the best secondaries in the league. And I think that Xavier Watts this year could step up his play so much that he could be good enough to become maybe a second-team All-Pro kind of safety. He is very good. Reminds me of exactly like Jessie Bates, which is ironic that they both are on the same team. Abdul Carter had a very disappointing rookie season. Now, normally some edge rushers, despite how high they get drafted, sometimes they start a little bit slow out the gate. But sometimes you have guys that come out in their rookie years and they give you 9-10 sacks. Abdul Carter, unfortunately, wasn't one of those guys, but I still think that Abdul Carter has a lot of potential. I still think that he's going to turn into a very productive player, and I can see him having one of the biggest year two jumps out of anybody on this list. I can see him being the guy that gives you 8, maybe 9.5 sacks, especially with you hiring John Harbaugh as your new head coach, who kind of specializes in getting the most out of the defensive line. That's kind of what John Harbaugh's calling card is. So I'm not ready to write off Abdul Carter. There's been plenty of rookie edge rushers that didn't really do that much their rookie seasons that have gone on to have very good careers. Rookie Pearsall, I think a lot of people are forgetting about how good rookie Pearsall really is. And I don't blame you guys for forgetting how good he is, since you don't really get to see too many opportunities to watch how good he is because he's not on the field that often. But when he is on the field, he's one of the best route runners in the league, has very good hands. He's very good after the catch. If rookie Pearsall can stay healthy this year, I think he can have the kind of breakout season that Brandon Ayuk had a few years ago that ultimately resulted in him getting that massive extension. Rookie Pearsall in this system with an offense that already has Mike Evans and George Kittle, there should be a lot of opportunities for him to have some big games, and he already has had his fair share of big games here and there. It's just he can't stay on the field. He's the definition of injury prone, handle with care. He's like fragile luggage. They need to put on the back of Ricky Pearsall's jersey, warning, if you breathe on him, the brother gets injured. He's gone through a lot of injuries, and he's only in his third season now, but I think his third season should be his best season. God forbid he gets injured again. Demarion Overshaw, I think, is one of the most underrated linebackers entering this season. His rookie season got cut short due to a season-ending injury. When he came back last year, he was really good, one of the best players on the Cowboys defense. I was a huge fan of Demarion Overshaw from what he did at Texas. He's very solid in pass coverage. I think he's very good against the run. And under new defensive coordinator Christian Parker, I think he's really going to be able to max out all of Demarion Overshaw's abilities. And the Cowboys are going to have one of the most improved defenses in the league just from what they've added on the secondary, on the defensive line as well. Demarion Overshaw, look out for him. This is a very underrated linebacker. The talent's there. In spite of the injury that he suffered, I don't think he's lost a step at all. Offensive tackle Josh Simons is going to be one of the most important pieces of Kansas City's offense this year. If Kansas City makes it back to the playoffs, Josh Simmons is going to be one of the best left tackles in the league. The Kansas City Chiefs have had a huge question mark at left tackle for the last few years until they were able to luck up and get Josh Simmons in the back end of the first round in last year's draft. And before he ended up missing time due to a family issue off the field, and then when he came back, he ended up missing the rest of the season due to an injury. When he was healthy, he was very good. He was probably the best, if not one of the best, rookie offensive linemen in the league. So you get him back in year 2. If he can stay fully healthy, not only is he going to be very good, but he's going to be one of the best left tackles in the league. It's hard to find elite left tackles. So if Josh Simmons turns out to be that for Kansas City, the dynasty is back, people. The dynasty is back. Colston Loveland was drafted in the first round of last year's draft by the Bears. It kind of shocked people that they took a tight end when they already had Cole Kmet, who they recently gave an extension to. But you can see why the Bears were willing to take another tight end high, even though they already had Cole Kmet, because Colston Loveland is kind of like Brock Bowers in a sense. He's a lot faster than what you normally see out of a tight end. He runs very good routes. He's not really a tight end to me. He's kind of like a hybrid of a tight end and a wide receiver, because they use him a good amount in the slot, which makes him a mismatch nightmare since most slot corners aren't big enough to guard against this guy with his size. And then 2, he's a lot better of a route runner than what you would expect him to be. So if you match him up with a linebacker, he's going to eat them up one-on-one, especially if it's in man coverage. Colston Loveland is just a mismatch nightmare. There's just so many different ways that Ben Johnson is going to be able to use him this year. With them getting rid of DJ Moore, I expect him to have a higher volume of targets. And he's one of those tight ends that if you play fantasy football, you need to draft him early. It's very hard to find tight ends that can give you the kind of production that you're going to get out of Colston Loveland from a fantasy football standpoint. He could be good enough to win you your league if you draft him high enough. So I'm a huge fan of Colston Loveland. If you're looking for that Brock Bowers kind of tight end, Colston Loveland is kind of the closest that you can get to that. Seahawks wide receiver Tory Horton. Now, a lot of you guys probably don't know who the hell this dude is. I'm a huge fan of this guy, stemming back from when he was destroying Deion Sanders in Colorado a few years ago when Colorado State was playing the Buffs in Deion's first year. He got drafted in the mid-rounds by the Seahawks in last year's draft. And I was telling you guys around this same time last year that Tory Horton was going to snap for Seattle. Unfortunately, he ended up beating out MVS in training camp for the wide receiver 3 spot. He ends up making a few amount of impactful plays for Seattle. He had a few kick returns for touchdowns. He also had a few explosive plays downfield in the passing game, but unfortunately, he got a season cut short due to an injury. And when he got injured, that's what prompted the Seahawks to go ahead and trade for Rashee Rice. Now, despite them extending Rashee Rice, I still expect Tory Horton to break out this year. How is Tory Horton going to break out, JT, when he's behind Rashee Rice and Cooper Kupp? Cooper Kupp is going to get injured. And I'm not wishing injuries on Cooper Kupp, but if you have followed Cooper Kupp's career, you know that it's not a matter of if he'll get injured. It's just a simple matter of when he'll get injured. And eventually, when Cooper Kupp gets injured this year, Tory Horton is going to step up in his place, and he's going to take his job, and he's going to have a breakout campaign. You saw what Tory Horton did and the few amount of action that he participated in last year for Seattle. So if he plays the entire season or plays a significant amount of the season and gets some significant targets, I expect Tory Horton to have a breakout season for Seattle. And I believe it's going to happen because either Rashee Rice or Cooper Kupp are going to get injured. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. I'm not hating on Seattle. I just want my dude Tory Horton to get an opportunity. And you know what they say? In the NFL, one man's misfortune is another man's opportunity. And I think Cooper Kupp's misfortune is eventually going to be the opportunity that propels Tory Horton into having a breakout second season. Now, next up, I have Ashton Jeanty. Ashton Jeanty, the majority of the rushing yards that he had last year was solely due to him. Making guys miss. in the open field, one-on-one. Most DBs aren't trying to tackle this freight train. Unfortunately, the offensive line didn't do the brother any justice last year. As soon as the brother got the ball, he was man in the backfield on the majority of occasions. And when he wasn't man in the backfield, he had to make like 3, 4, or 5 guys miss. But you saw what Ashton Jeanty did against the Houston Texans last year. He was so dominant against the Texans that literally that's all the Texans were talking about. The Texans players, the Texans coaches, all they were talking about despite winning the game was how damn good Ashton Jeanty was and how special of a player he was. Like, it was to the point D'Amico Ryans was saying, yeah, I don't watch a lot of college football. I knew he was a good player, but you see this dude in person, you're like, wow. And I was like, wow. So with them hiring Clint Kubiak, who comes from Seattle, who runs a run-heavy scheme, Ashton Jeanty having an improved offensive line, having Jackson Powers-Johnson back fully healthy, I expect him to not just have a breakout season, but to establish himself as one of the elite running backs in football. If you play fantasy football, if you got asked out by Ashton Jeanty last year like how I did, run it back for Ashton Jeanty, because I definitely am. I have no problem drafting Ashton Jeanty first overall. If you're in the fantasy league with me, just know that Ashton Jeanty will be my first pick. So if you plan on getting Ashton Jeanty, you better make sure you draft the brother early, because if not, I'm going to beat you to it. And lastly, we got this brother Cam Ward. The stats don't show how good Cam Ward was last year. I watched every snap of Cam Ward's rookie season, and I was shocked at how good he was. There were so many plays that Cam Ward made that should have been for losses. There were so many sacks that he was able to throw out of and turn into big plays. Cam Ward is just one of those players that he can make a bad play turn into a great play. With Robert Saleh being his new head coach, he's going to have a better defense. And he also brought along with him Brian Daboll, who's one of the better offensive minds in the league. And if you remember, when Brian Daboll was coaching the Giants last year, he wanted Cam Ward. The Giants actually tried to trade up to get the first overall pick for the Titans so they could get Cam Ward, but they weren't budging. So that's just how the power of the universe works. If you want to work with a quarterback, eventually you can get fired and ultimately end up working with the quarterback that you wanted to work with the whole entire time. Like, Cam Ward is an absolute dog. And now you got Cornell Tate. You got that man, Malik Ironmaner, who some Titans fans may argue deserves to be on this list. Trust me, I tried to find a place to put him on this list, but there just wasn't enough space on the graphics to slide Malik Ironmaner in there. But I'm not sleeping on him. I'm not sleeping on Calvin Ridley possibly coming back. But can the brother stay healthy? I don't know. But with Brian Daboll calling the plays, Cam Ward is going to be the best second-year quarterback in the NFL. He's going to be better than Shedeur Sanders. He's going to be better than Tyler Shuck. He's going to be better than Jackson Dart. Like, go back and watch Cam Ward's rookie tape. He was very phenomenal. Like, people are gassing up Bryce Young. I asked somebody, who would you rather have, Cam Ward or Bryce Young? And they told me Bryce Young. I said, seriously? You want to have the guy who threw for 54 yards against the best defense in the NFL? Look at what Cam Ward was doing against the Seattle Seahawks. Like, Mike McDonald was getting a little bit scared of what Cam Ward was doing. Cam Ward can play. He's like the black Tony Romo back there, in my opinion. But these are the 10 breakout players the NFL doesn't see coming in 2026. Leave your thoughts on my breakout players list down in the comment section down below. What are some guys that you believe are going to have a breakout season this year coming up? And this is it for this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Shout out to my guy, Archangel80. Shout out to User. You got too many syllables in your name, my dude. But shout out to you. Shout out to everybody that's tapped in, man. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Before we get up on out of here, make sure that you smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon if you're new so you don't miss when we drop new content. Remember, we're talking all things football. We don't just talk NFL. We talk college football as well. We just talk everything football. So if you're somebody who just lives, eats, breathes, dies, and sleeps football, this is the place to be. Give us a follow at JT Sports _ where you can find us on Instagram, X, TikTok. Send us any topic that you would want us to talk about on a future episode, any questions that you would like answered. Give us a 5-star review. We're not just a YouTube channel. We are a podcast. You find this episode and all of our previous ones in audio format on all podcasting platforms. Give us a 5-star review, man. We are trying to crack the top 100 of the Apple Podcast football charts. Trust me, if I could do it myself, I would. And I would create 1,000 accounts to make that happen. But unfortunately, I don't have that much time on my hands. So if you would please do your brother a favor, rate JT Sports 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. The link is down in the description below. And join the Discord. We're trying to get that thing more active. If you're trying to talk football at any time of the day, the JT Sports Discord is the place to do it. The link is down in the description below. I appreciate you guys